Agree to it.
There we go.
Got it. There we go. So we've taken it off LinkedIn and we brought it onto Zoom just because we think that it's going to be more engaging. There's going to give people more opportunities to talk, etc. So we will be recording it, as you know, and we're going to be offering this link of the recording to everybody who is registered but couldn't make it for some reason. And we're also going to put it on our YouTube channel for other people to get the wisdom from everybody who was talking today. So the way this is going to work is we're going to do a short presentation, and after the during that presentation, if everybody could mute themselves, that'd be great. And then after the presentation, we're going to go into a discussion, and hopefully everybody will have tons of questions or will want to share experiences. And if you do want to talk, please use the reactions button at the bottom and raise your hand so we don't all start talking at the same time. That's about it for the technical aspects of it. And so now let me introduce everybody. And I'm going to start with Avril because he's on my right there. And he comes in with many, many years of entrepreneurial experience and marketing experience. And he is here to challenge everybody's existing beliefs so that they can live their purpose in their personal and in their business life. Then there's Eric, who looks very excited to be here right now. And he brings in tons and tons of years of experience in all kinds of areas of business.
I'm not that old.
Oh, come on. Just it's a wisdom thing. That's not our age thing. And what he's really doing right now, he's taking all that experience and all that knowledge that he's gained over the years, and he is putting it together, and he is teaching leaders and in how to incorporate intuition into a decision-making process, which I thought was interesting to start with. And then after a number of conversations with Eric, I decided that this is going to be something I'm going to definitely dive into more. So if you're interested in learning more about it, Eric will be with us in a couple of weeks doing a presentation on that subject. And then there's the little me. Yes, I'm leaving Peter for the end for a reason. There's a little me. I am the self-proclaimed geek of branding. And I've been in the branding industry in one form or another for about 30 plus years. So I come from the tactical side of things as well as the strategy side of things. And my goal is to demystify branding for everybody. I want to make sure that every business owner understands what brand and branding is, how to build it, how to grow it, how to elevate it without pulling their hair out and wondering what it's all about. And then, of course, there's Peter. He is the fourth partner in crime. And the reason why I left him for the end is because today he's going to be sharing something really, really cool with us. I'm just going to say we all make plans. We all try to set goals and we try to achieve them, and we try to be successful doing it. And more often than not, we find that we're not quite hitting the goals the way we thought we would. And Peter is going to talk to us about how to set goals and all the different areas that are involved in doing it so that we can do it well and we can actually reach the goals that we decide to reach. So with that in mind, Peter, it's all yours.
I thank you very much. Yeah, we are going to talk today a little bit about goal setting. And let me do this first and share my screen. And hopefully we can get this going again. Hey, look at that. Okay. I think we are all set. Everyone can see the screen.
Yep.
Beautiful. So honestly, you know, we are certainly set up to have a discussion afterwards. If we want to get into, you know, questions during, absolutely speak up. Raise your hand or put something in the chat. Ruth can watch the chat for me, if you will. Yep. Otherwise, I will just, you know, kind of go through this and we'll talk a little bit about what our goals are even for today. So there we go. So if we look at our goals for today, I want to talk a little bit about discussing mindset around goals. And I think for me, it is um, the mindset and the thinking going into the goal setting. We've all heard goal setting lists, talking about objectives and strategies and tactics and things like that. I am not going to talk about those things today. I am talking more about your mindset, and the topics that we're going to go through today are the things up on the screen. So everything from keystone goals all the way down to asymmetry, and final thoughts and discussions. So from there, I want to talk about unlocking your potential, and talking about goal setting. So looking at the first thing, and just trying to get to an agreement of goal setting, and I think things that we can all agree on with goal setting. I want to establish a baseline for some of those benefits that we do for goal setting. Goal setting obviously helps us tap into our full potential. By setting our goals, individuals can identify their strengths and weaknesses and work towards self-improvement. This also speaks to the measurement of goals. Goals are much more likely to be achieved when they are measured. They are exponentially more likely to be achieved when they are measured and reported. So how can we, incorporate some of those things into our goals? Goals also help us provide direction and focus. They help us establish clear goals, to prioritize tasks and make better decisions. They help us prioritize and say no to things that are not our goals. They help us with our decision-making processes. Goals also enhance our self-confidence and motivation. They help us achieve goals by boosting our self-esteem in the end, as a result, and provide motivation to take on new challenges. That in turn obviously helps us move forward and take on more difficult things into the future. So those are kind of the baselines for why we set goals, I think in general. I want to ask you guys, at the beginning, and I'm not going to ask you to answer, but think to yourself, how do you currently define a goal? How do you currently pursue a goal? And those are things that I'm going to ask you at the end of the presentation as well. Why do we or don't we achieve our goals? Everyone has seen the stats on, health goals, right? The gyms are absolutely packed January 1st and are empty by February 1st. What happens in between January 1st and February 1st with our health goals? Some people don't even make it the 3 to 4 weeks, right? By the middle of January, they've given up on their goals. What happens during that process of us giving up on our goals? Many times we need to frame our goals with tighter constraints. Many times we have to look at things in an approach versus avoid mentality. Are you approaching your goals and looking at them positively, or are you trying to avoid something? Are you looking at things that you don't want to happen or things that you avoid? Studies show that when we accomplish our goals from an approach mindset, we are much more in a feelings of being more positive, more proud, developing confidence in ourselves. And then we've got the psychological aspect of what you focus on expands, or selective attention. So it's the example of, right, you buy a new car and all of a sudden you see that car everywhere. What you tend to focus on, what you think of, you start to see in the world as well. You start to see that in your universe. So how are we doing that with our goals? I want to give you the concept of a keystone goal. This is something obviously that's taken from architecture and engineering, but it's Gary Keller calls it, and gives us the question: what is the one thing that, if achieved, would make everything easier, or unnecessary? So that keystone goal is a piece that's holding it all together. If we take it away, it's the whole thing, the whole structure is going to fall apart. So how can we incorporate this into again, our goals? Goal clarity is an essential ingredient. Goal honesty. What do you really want? In working with business owners, I find this is the most difficult question to ask and get answered. What do you want? Very few people can actually answer that question. Part of it is taking away self-limiting beliefs. It's looking at the question, all progress starts by telling the truth. Are you telling yourself the truth? Success demands singleness of purpose. Kobe Bryant actually said that. He was a man who was very singled in his pursuit of being the best basketball player on the planet. That's all he ever did. And if it didn't serve that purpose, he didn't do it. So looking at your success, what is that keystone goal, one that's going to make everything else pale in comparison? I want you also to think about the language, obviously, that you use. So what is the language of success, and how are you talking and thinking about it? There are many studies highlighting the positive effects, right, of neuroscience, the inner talk, the inner voice, the internal voice or monologue that we are having with ourselves. I think it allows us, to have inputs, and gives us inputs into our brain. Are we putting junk food into our brain, or are we doing things that help with meeting our goals and meeting some of those keystone goals that we talk about? Things. What are we watching? And one of the things I wanted to share with you was a quote from Benjamin Hardy that talks about, watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. Watch your actions, they become habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. And watch your character, it becomes your destiny. Lots of people talk about journaling your thoughts and recreating both your present and your past based on journaling your thoughts. Do you talk? I mean, there's lots of studies out there about gratitude and ending your day with a thankful mindset or having gratitude in your heart. What are you thankful for? What did you approach that day that will help you frame in a positive light what happened that day? Did it happen to you, or did it happen for you? Obviously, if you're looking at things happening for you, you're turning things into a positive light. Things happen because I came to this from a negative mindset, right? What part did you play? It's about being more intentional about your language and using words to create the ideas and shape the future that you want. Your language creates the selective attention that your brain will focus on. Are you feeding it the right things? So language is obviously very important. I want to also talk about environment. So if you were to review your calendar over the last day, the last week, the last month, what are you seeing? What are you seeing? What are you spending time on? Where are you spending time? What is the location of the place you are spending time? What does it look like? Does it help you meet your goals ultimately? Do you have a desk that is completely cluttered and you can't find things? And I won't show my desk right now. I'm just going to say, what are you accomplishing with your time? Are you looking at your results and really digging into them? Some people say that our results equal our standards. So think about that for just a second. The results you get become your standards. Are you shooting for something else? Are you trying to go for something else? Who are you spending time with? Again, are they helping you reach your goals? Are they supportive, or are they negative towards your goals? And are there environmental aspects to change that will get you into better habits? Is there a TV in your bedroom? Do you look at your phone the last thing before you go to sleep and the first thing when you wake up? How are those inputs and those environments helping you? I do not bring ice cream into the house anymore. Ask me why.
Why? Why, Peter?
Because it's gone within a day.
Oh.
So I try not to bring ice cream into the house anymore. So I also want to talk about habits. Do your habits mirror your goals? If someone were to look at your habits, are they clear about what you're trying to achieve? There's a book out there by James Clear where he talks about atomic habits, and I'm focusing on more the company aspect of this for right now. But he talks about the purpose of setting goals as a company is to win the game. The purpose of building systems or developing habits within those systems and processes that you create for your company is to continue playing the game. And if you think about it, this goes back, Avril and I have talked about this a number of times with the infinite game and Simon Sinek. The goal is to keep playing the game. You never win the game. If you think about it, you never actually win the game in business. And as a person, what do you actually win? You meet your goals, but then you're off to the next goal. And there's kind of an empty feeling. So he talks about setting goals, sometimes in the short term versus the long term. Does your goal serve the overall purpose and desired outcome for your life as well? He talks a lot in the book about developing those habits, and at the end of the book talks about deliberate practice. And it's choosing to focus on the habit that can get you into that deep flow state and get you into doing deeper work, more vertical work, instead of skipping across horizontally all the different things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so how can you get more vertical? How can you habit stack to get the best results? The example that James Clear talks about was Twyla Tharp, the famous dancer who has done lots of things with Broadway and had a very long career. He talks about her habit in the morning. She gets up at 5:30. She puts on, her leotard, her warm-up clothes and things. And she said, it's not the habit of going to the gym. It's the habit of getting in the cab or the taxi and telling the taxi driver where to go. That is her habit. And that's the habit that she focuses on. Once she gets in the taxi and tells him where to go to the gym on 91st Street or wherever, that is how she gets into the deep flow state. It's the trigger. It's the habit stacking. She gets up, she puts on her clothes, she goes down, and once she gets in the taxi, that is her trigger. That's when she starts thinking about, what am I going to work on that day? How am I going to get better? And so how can you have a trigger like that and develop a habit that gets you into that deeper flow state, that you connect the two? And sometimes it's connecting 2, 3, 4 different habits, right, of doing those things. So what are your habits? One of the things that Benjamin Hardy talks about in the 10x is easier than 2x book, and we'll talk a little bit more about that book in a couple more slides as well, is what is your habit from 5 to 7? What would happen in your life if you dedicated 2 hours every morning to learning, thinking, planning, meditating, strategizing, praying, journaling, all those different things that help you live your future life, your future self? Every person has the same 24 hours. Do you spend your time on good activities or better or best activities? And there's a quote I want to share with you from John Maxwell. You cannot overestimate the unimportance of practically everything. Look back on your last 3 months, and how would you describe what you did the last 3 months to anybody? What are the things that stand out? What are the things that actually made a difference and that helped you either reach your goals or accomplish something, or you achieved something? What are those things that you would pull out of the last 3 months? Most of it is unimportant. Most of it is just getting to something else. And it becomes a distraction. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about transforming thoughts into ideas. First comes the thought in your head, and then the plan on how to do it, and then the action. So while listening or reading, sometimes you will generate, right? A lot of people talk about taking a shower because you have no other inputs. You get your best ideas while you're in the shower. So how do you generate those really good ideas, and how can you better accomplish your goals? It's acting on those and not hesitating. It's when a brilliant idea sparks, start writing it down, start making notes about it. It's usually the idea after the idea that really matters. I talk a lot about with marketing for people. It's talking about the benefit of the benefit when you're trying to sell something. And this is kind of along that same idea of, it's the idea after the idea that really matters. It's when you go a little bit more vertical and you talk about, again, the benefit of the benefit. It's not just that things will, a financial planner will help you plan your retirement. It's the life you get to live because you planned your retirement. It's the benefit of the benefit that you want to talk about and get people emotionally involved. So again, it's that idea after the idea. Pause and reflect when you get a core insight, and then act immediately upon every prompting that you get. It's about speed of implementation. It's the results that are focused on the goal and the measurement to that success. How can you turn those thoughts into ideas and into actions? James Clear in Atomic Habits talks about your outcomes in life often are a lagging measure of your habits. You can pick a category, and this applies to it, right? Your weight is a result of your eating and exercise habits and not having ice cream in the house. Your bank account is a result of your financial and spending habits, right? So another way to look at this is your results, again, are your standards or become your standards. So what do you want them to be? One of the things that Benjamin Hardy talks about in the 10X book, 10X is easier than 2X, is your identity. He talks about it in the framework of your identity equals your story and your standards. So your identity is that which you are most committed to as a person. He looks at things from a psychological standpoint. He's a psychological or an organizational psychologist, I think is his title. But past used to dictate the present. That's how psychologists used to look at everything. Your past used to define your present, and you could look at your past to determine the present that you were going to have. How can we reinterpret or reconstruct our memory in light of that mental sense? And in a sense, it's more accurate now to say that our present causes the meaning of the past. So it's looking at it backwards. It's our present causes the meaning of the past that is more accurate than the past causes the meaning of the present. Our present moods and future goals affect our memories. You are a different person now than you were then. How does that affect how you look at things and how you reconstruct the past? So you want to have mastery over how you look at the past, how you reinterpret the past, and say, again, I'm not the same person I was even a week ago, much less a year ago or 10 years ago. Same kind of psychology, right? That your past used to dictate your present used to dictate your future. Not the right way to look at it. I think there's a different way to look at it. What we want to do is have our future dictate our present, and we want to have our present dictate our past. So as you start looking at all of these different arrows, it's about having mastery over each of these different components. It's about following the figure eight through this whole thing. This is what we do constantly in our minds. The past is not dead, the present isn't dead, and the future isn't dead. They are constantly going on in our head. We are constantly reliving things in the past and thinking about the future while we're living today. So how can you become psychologically flexible and think about them differently? So just let that kind of sink in a little bit. The other way that Benjamin Hardy talks about it is having a seemingly impossible future that will help you filter and correctly choose the 20% of what we will work on to achieve the goals that we have for our future selves. So how often do you think to yourself, I wonder if this is the right choice for me now? Will this work going forward? You know, we ask ourselves those questions, and those are the questions that come from someone who is letting the present dictate the future. Have a future so big that it dictates what you do in the present. So it helps you clarify and filter and determine what you do in the present. I don't remember who said this, but if you want a better present, I think Dan Sullivan said this, who's owner of Strategic Coach up in Toronto. I think he's in your neck of the woods, Ruth and Avril. But he talks about identifying and filtering a future. If you want a better present situation, choose a bigger future or goal, and let the future dictate what you're doing now. It will help you dictate what you're doing in the present. So this is basically what the 10x book is built around, is the 80% versus the 20%. It's the old Pareto principle, right? 20% of your customers, your revenue come from, or 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your customers, type of thing. 80% of what you're doing is your existing mindset. If you want to double your business, you want to double your mindset, double your revenue, double whatever, you can keep 80% of what you're currently doing. You need to do 20% of something new. If you want to 10x your business, your mindset, your goals in the future, you have to keep 20% of what you're doing and create 80% new habits, new relationships, new paths going forward. That's how you 10x. To begin to realize your 10x, you need to go all in on the 20% that is the most effective, the most time efficient way that you spend your time right now. So the 80% is usually the security and the distraction, which can present themselves in people, habits, situation, commitments that you need to let go of. So are you trying to increase your business by 10%, or are you trying to increase your business by 10 times? If you look at a 10% increase, there's literally 100 different ways that you can increase your business by 10%. There are only a few paths for you to increase your business by 10x. It helps you clarify that goal going forward. And that's what he talks about a lot in the book. There are three main areas, of focus in the 10x book. It talks about identity, time, and leadership. So identity, we've covered it a little bit. It's about your story. It's, are you focused on your future and having that dictate your present? Your standards, again, you want to raise your floor. As you increase your ceiling, you have to bring your floor up. You have to raise your standards and ask yourself, as the age you are now, do you put up with the same shit that you did 10 years ago? This is an example of raising your floor, right? You don't look at things the same way. You don't put up with the same crap anymore. Under time, it's looking at selective attention. What you focus on expands. It's looking at, instead of time management, look at energy management. I know as I get older, sometimes it's not about time management. It's when I do something, because I don't have the energy anymore at 8 o'clock at night to tackle something. It's not going to happen. And it's also looking at a return on your investment, also looking at it, what is the return on your attention? Everyone is trying to get your attention, from advertisers to television shows to your neighbors to whatever. Where and who do you allocate your time to produce the greatest results? So start to look at things as as what do I need to spend my attention on as well. Leadership is really about who are you giving more trust to in your life. And as a leader, it's incumbent upon you, I think, to trust someone first. It's not about them proving themselves to you and saying, I can trust them now. As a leader, it's about you saying, I need to trust you first. And then the relationship starts to build from there. So who are you giving trust to? Yourself, your employees. It's about teaching the correct principles and letting people govern themselves. It's not about micromanaging. People start to self-select themselves to you and with you and for you because of the goals that you set forward. So again, how are you leading that? And as a leader of a company, how are you presenting yourselves as the leader of that company? Are you providing trust? Wanted to touch just for a second on Anti-Fragile. This is a book that is gaining traction. It was published probably 13, 14 years ago. Nassim Taleb is the guy who talks about it. I think it's called Black Swan. And he talks about anti-fragile a lot and building both people, companies, cultures, countries that are anti-fragile. And I wanted to just talk about this real quick. Fragile, obviously, the definition, things people, they shatter or break as a result of being fragile. If you're resilient, being resilient helps you overcome challenges, but it takes a toll. It takes a piece out of you to overcome that challenge. And people are resilient as a result of that. Being anti-fragile is actually the opposite of being fragile. It's where you actually get stronger and more adaptable as a result of the event that you didn't foresee and that happened to you. So are you anti-fragile or are you resilient? Being resilient, again, it's going to take a toll. And over time, you're going to wear yourself down. What you want to actually be is anti-fragile. He gives examples of this as the human body. Our bodies are anti-fragile and it benefits to stressors to a point. But muscles grow strongest when they're taxed with the highest amount of weight beneath their breaking point. So if you want to build muscle mass, if you want to get stronger, you use heavy weight with a few repetitions and then you recover. And I want to emphasize recover. We all have to rest. You can't just keep pushing your body through task after task after task and not let it recover. Bones get denser when episodic stress is applied. Conversely, you can see a picture of me on the bottom there. It can lead to degeneration and atrophy if you're not stressing those muscles as well.
Is that
So
after you ate your ice cream?
that's after they ate the ice cream. Exactly. It just puts you out pretty much. So anti-fragile systems benefit from periodic stressor, but also benefit when these are distributed randomly compared to being regularly scheduled. We start to anticipate them, right? And it's so we want things that are random. We want to keep things that are random. So I think this is a very important point of being anti-fragile. We don't know when things are coming sometimes. We don't know when 2008 is going to happen. We don't know when the pandemic's going to happen. They happen anyway. How are we anti-fragile as a result of those? And are we anti-fragile as a result of those? I want to switch gears a little bit to someone I just got introduced to. I don't know if anyone has seen Graham Weaver. He's a guy who's been around for a while, has lots of YouTube videos. VC guy and was part of lots of different companies, taking them public and things. He has a great talk about living in asymmetric life. And there are 4 points that he talks about that I thought were interesting in terms of goal setting. The first point he talks about was do hard things, get used to being uncomfortable. And he talks about everything you want comes after worst first. So the graph over there is a typical graph that we follow on our journey in life, as a company, as a stock, right? What you see is growth, and then people retreat for a while, and then they grow again at a higher level. Their floor goes up, right? The low point isn't as low as it was before because everyone has raised their floor, raised their standard. We also don't stay there as long. And so I love the quote, everything you want in life in as your goals comes after worse first. You get worse before you get better. You have to implement those things. You have to learn them. And Benjamin Hardy talks about a concept too, about lessons are repeated until they're learned. So sometimes we keep repeating the same lessons and we don't get it, and we stay in those valleys a little bit too long. The second thing Graham Weaver talks about is doing your thing. You're going to suffer in life, is what he talks about. There's no getting around it. So choose something that is worth suffering for. And I actually had a board member as one of my boards. He talked about this at a meeting just a couple of weeks ago. Choose your hard. Staying the same is just as hard as trying to grow. And sometimes it's harder. Sometimes things get worse if you don't change. So choose your hard, right? Choose something that's worth suffering for and go do it. The other thing Graham Weaver talks about is doing it for decades. There is nothing that won't yield to you being your best over a decade. If you are persistent and you keep doing what you're doing and trying to get 1% better, guess what? You're going to get there eventually. It's the river through the rock, right? It's the Grand Canyon. Think about the Grand Canyon. Do it for decades. Do it for a million years. The other part is write your story. Write your story, then make it happen, versus the other way around, which goes back to Benjamin Hardy's make your future bigger. So it's not about writing what happened to you and letting your past or your present dictate your future. It's about choosing, being intentional about your future, and then writing your story that fits into that narrative. So it's not, again, that there won't be hard times. You get to choose how long you stay there. It's all of those things. Do it for decades, write your story. So how does this all apply to goal setting? I look at are you committed? Commitment is not your goals, it's your results. So when you commit to a bigger game, you need a new identity, a new strategy. Are you psychologically flexible? Are you anti-fragile? Do you output more than you input every day? Meaning, are you writing? Are you creating content? Are you creating something more than you're watching, more than you're letting other people create content, having input, things like that? It's choosing 2 to 3 overarching goals, creating milestones or waypoints within those goals, and having an accountability structure built in. So do you have a coach? Do you have friends? Do you have employees? Who is going to hold you accountable through all of these things? Dan Sullivan talks about the 4 C's. He starts with commitment. You have to commit to a goal. You have to have courage to see it through. You have to develop your capability or your skill set, and then you develop your confidence to actually carry that out. And I love that 4 C's approach. It all begins with commitments. Are you interested in something, or are you committed to it? And I think we can all appreciate the difference. Again, a goal is something you can see, a target is something you can hit. What targets do you have as part of that goal? And Jim Rohn talks about, having more than 2 or 3 goals is to have none. So you can't just have 20 different goals, because none of them are going to happen, most likely. So in summary, I'd like to leave you with, again, do you have an approach mindset or an avoid mindset? Are you approaching things happening for you, not to you? Are you developing only 2 to 3 goals? And And of that, are you including a keystone goal, one that kind of overarches, and if you achieve it, helps you achieve the other ones as well? Do you have the language, environment, habits needed to increase your likelihood to a successful outcome? And are you spending time with who, what you want to be the future self that you want to be? Let that drive your present. Make it bigger. Don't play small. Be psychologically flexible and anti-fragile in your approach, and choose your hard, right? Live asymmetrically. So I want to also kind of leave you with the quote of, the system is designed to defend the system. Your comfort zone, again, lies within the 80% of what you do and what got you here. If you want to do something you've never done, you got to let go of the 80%. What got you here won't get you there. Graham Weaver has a great quote at the end of his talk that talks about your biggest obstacle really is fear. Fear is manipulative. It's disguising itself as being practical, helping you, saving you, talking about not me, not now. Are you going to give yourself permission to lead the life that you were meant to live? And do you have the courage to do that? So think about, the system is designed to defend the system. And the last slide is, suddenly it seems a little more possible.
Wow.
So with
Well,
that, we didn't ask questions throughout.
you know what? It was floating so well. It was hard to ask questions, but I was writing a bunch of points down. I mean, I personally think that this presentation could be broken down to 10 different presentations, and we could do an hour on each. There's so much information in there that's so valuable.
It's skimming across the top, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Does anybody have any questions or wants to share? No? Okay. Well,
how do people, I guess I'm interested in learning how people set goals now. You know, what are you looking at for 24? Avril.
Well, I had to find out where my hand was when you first answered that. Ruth gave us the instructions, so I didn't want to speak too soon. Yeah. Peter, great presentation. There was a number of things that I wrote down that really struck, and one of the last ones you were talking about, do the hard first. It strikes me, there seems to be, at least I seem to notice on LinkedIn, there's an explosion of people doing cold baths and cold dips because it's hard, and you're in it for a minute or two, and then after that you make the next, you're fine. But it really struck me about doing that hard thing first, and one of the other things that really resonated was the habit tracking, about what is the next action step. Somebody talks about, well, I've got to get an oil change. What's yours? Well, take the car into the mechanic. No. You got to next call the mechanic and set an appointment up. Like you said, I thought there was a great thing about the dancer. All she had to do was get in the habit of calling the cab, get in the cab, and then it was done. Her day just flows from there. Yeah. And so we seem to skip I'm going to say, the simple things, and we don't see the first step that we have to take, and we're looking too far down the line for that. So that really resonated with me, as did the accountability of setting goals and then sharing them too. So you're just not, here's my goal, and you don't tell anybody, because, well, basically, if you don't do it, it's not going to happen, and so those habits, and it's kind of like not having the ice cream right in the fridge, and having it there. And like me, I don't have chips, I don't have cheesies and things like Cheezos and things like that around the house, but yeah, wind up at a party and my fingers are going to be orange in pretty quick order. I don't want that stuff in my house. So there were so many things that I took away from that. So really, thanks so much.
Yeah. Who believes that there are 4 serving sizes in a pint of Haagen-Dazs? I mean, give me a break. I mean, right? That's just wrong.
That's wrong. Wendy.
I think for me, goal setting sometimes is a topic that makes it think like it has to be elaborate, that it has to be overcomplicated. I like the idea when you talk about the simple things. And I think that we talk so much more about the life work balance, that the goal setting actually is part of that. Because if you set those goals, you have to live your life intentionally to be able to achieve them. And I'm not sure, I haven't quite figured out if there is a separation between the work goals and the personal goals. They're really, and it could be because the older I get and the farther in my work process, or my work life, that they're much more intertwined than when I first started out. But I think that's part of the things that I want to look at for 2024. How do I keep those two in balance?
Well, I think that makes sense. And I think that that's one of the things that everybody talks about, and we all talk about it. And I think that Avril is going to agree with me, because we've had this conversation a number of times, is when you enter the world of entrepreneurship, the personal and business goals quite often overlap. We don't necessarily let go of our business just because it's our personal life. It almost becomes one. So I think it's really important to keep that in check. Eric.
So a couple of man, I can't use my words today. A couple of comments. Holy crap. So when you're talking about work-life balance, I would encourage you to really understand what your why is, because then it's much easier to have both. I think a work-life balance, I don't even consider that, because my life is the balance. To do as attack 3. I'm done 2 out of 3 right now. So it's, almost 1 o'clock in my world. I've got 2 out of my 3 things already done. If you keep it simple like that, it's very easy. It's much easier to achieve, because we're entrepreneurs, business people, high achievers, whatever that is. We all want to do great things. I know Ashley's the same way. She's just like going all the time. But what are the 3 things you got to do today in order to move the ball forward? And it may not be getting your oil changed. It might be something else. But just be curious around what those things are. What happened to Peter?
No, he just left, and he just stopped
exactly.
recording, and
So,
that's the
anyway,
whole thing up now.
Yeah. But just some things that I do in my life and world, just to kind of share along with the goal setting, because we've got this whole thing that goals can be daunting. It's like, it's really kind of not, if you think about it, if you change the way you think about it, because it becomes much easier. Let's just put it that way. And then it's like you were saying earlier, it's just creating that action that all makes it work. So great job, Peter. Thanks. I'm glad you're back.
Yeah, what
Thanks.
happened to you, Peter?
Ice cream came in the house. I had to take a break.
So I have a question that when Peter was talking about the past, the present, and the future, and the idea of do not limit yourself when you're creating your future. So how do you approach the whole concept so you don't limit your beliefs? Because it's so easy. Somebody asked you today, well, what is your goal financially? Well, sometimes we're going to go, well, I'd be okay if I just made this much. But what if we actually went all out and said, I want to make $500,000 next year? It seems like a huge goal, but how do we stop ourselves from thinking small? I guess that's my question.
I think, whenever you create something, that is bigger than you think is possible, do you start to figure out things on ways to get there, or do you start looking at the obstacles?
Okay.
And what do you spend time on? And it's asking yourself, how could this work? How could this be possible? What needs to happen in order for that to take place? You start asking yourself those questions and figuring out the answers to those instead of looking at the obstacles, right? It's the approach versus avoid. This is another example of that.
Right. Arrow.
Well, there's something else about goals here and making them too big. I don't contemplate my goals until I have a vision of where I want that future to be. And so when I see that future in 5 years, in 10 years, then I can work back and set the goals up to have that future evolve and to allow it to show up, you know. And I really did, again, appreciate that 80-20 thing, Peter, that you were talking about. I'm a big believer in the 80-20 in every aspect of life almost. But if we have that vision and a big vision, then we can find the goals. I don't think there was a time in my life where setting goals, it seemed so hard and I didn't know what to do and all of that. And it's because I didn't have a vision of what my life was going to be in a few years in order to set a goal, you know. And once you do that, then they become attainable, because it's like that. You can set a habit for it. But I think that vision has to come first, you know, in knowing where we're going to go. Mm-hmm. And then we can decide how to get there.
Right. Yeah, I think that what it is, it's the whole idea of setting yourself up where it's kind of like when we work in my industry, you know, you set the final goal and then you work backwards and you figure out how do you break it down from a 3-month project to a weekly activities to a daily activities, and then it becomes more manageable. So I think it's about creating these little habits, these little momentum chain pieces that they eventually will grow into this big goal at the end. I think that's how it works. Anybody else has anything to say? Ashley? No. Oh, look like we're losing people. Well, okay, I'll stop talking. Apparently I'm a bad influence here. So anybody else wants to say?
We all know that though.
I know. I actually really enjoyed when Peter was talking about the language and the environment part of this. And I think the environment specifically, because I don't think we pay enough attention to it. And it's the whole, you know, what do you do with your time? How much time do we spend going down rabbit holes? And how much time do we spend doing things that are really not that important, as opposed to doing things that could actually generate the results that we want? And the other part that I found really interesting is who are we spending our time with? And I mean, I've always been told that you should be spending time. If you want to be a leader, you make sure that you hang out with people who are better leaders than you. And I think that is really important, because it is so comfortable to hang out with people who we're just used to having them. And, you know, they're not pushing us forward. So I think that's a really big part of it. Janine?
So thank you, Peter, for inviting me.
Yeah.
I feel like now I need to go to therapy because I have taken like 5 pages of notes, and all of what you said I resonate with. I really liked, and Camilla put it in the chat, about your future dictating your present. I really liked that a lot. And so I now know I have a lot of homework to do. And now this actually is kind of like can guide me in the direction of which, instead of having like, I have all these goals, but I'm not really working on them. I feel like I'm just kind of running in circles, you know, like I'm a gerbil in this little thing, and I'm like, they're not happening. But now I feel like I have a roadmap, and I can change my mindset. Like you know, what your intention was, is I can change my mindset and think of things a little bit different, and will definitely help me with planning my goals. And I do want to, I have so much that I want to do. And I like that, you know, having my future dictate my present is going to make a major difference in that. So I really, really thank you so much for the invite in your presentation. I mean, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad you were able to make it.
Well, I think that this is going to give everybody a lot food for thought. And I think that I know I'm going to be thinking about this a lot. I know Wendy had asked me, Peter, if we would be able to share the deck with her. So I'm wondering if we could get a copy of it that I can send out to everybody.
Yeah, I'll send it to you, and then you can send it out.
Okay.
And then we've got the recording as well.
Exactly.
Right. So yeah.
So
one other thing I'd just like to mention, and you already mentioned it, Ruth, was the language. That is so very important. I know I used to talk to my daughter when she was younger, and she'd always say, "Oh, Dad, I hate that. I hate this. I had that." And I go, and I have discussion. That's a pretty strong emotion there, darling. Can you maybe change it to that annoys me? You know, and we have a tendency, and this goes back to what you were talking about, Peter, of seeing the negative about that stops us. You know, when we see these goals. And then, oh my God, but what's going to get in the way? And, you know, and mostly it's always a how or a when. Well, how am I going to do that? When am I going to find the time for that? And, you know, those two things will stop us dead in our tracks. So it is that the language thing, it's a constant reminder. And so again, appreciate bringing that up. It's vital. Yeah.
I think that when it comes to language, also it's how we talk to ourselves and how we express ourselves. So we can be kind to ourselves, or we can become victims. And there is such a fine line between the two that it is so easy to slip through and be too hard on ourselves and become victims. So I think that that's something I love that part, Peter. That was fabulous. Wendy?
Responding to Avril about that, when you talk about what stops us, how am I going to do this? Or I think it's because when we set that goal, if it is that important to us and we're really, gets back to what Peter was talking about, the commitment and the confidence. If you want it bad enough, you're, by God, going to find a way to do it. And it's not going to be easy. You might have to do some workarounds, but at the end of the day, chasing that goal is your passion. That's what you're headed for. That's what you want. And I think it really does come down to figuring out what is it that is going to drive you to that goal because you want it bad enough.
Yeah, you said two things in there, words that were exactly right, Wendy, and it's your why and your what have to be so strong and not allow the how and the when to slow you down. And if they are, your why is your passion and what you're going to do. They just have to be solid and you have to be behind them. Yeah, I agree completely with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where that has to factor into when you're setting your goals, is to make sure that you are solid in the why and the what.
Yeah.
And that's the starting point.
Yeah.
Agree. Well, we're at the top of the hour, so I'm going to slowly bring it to an end. One of the things that came through for me when I was listening and following the presentation from Peter is just how much that is such a perfect lead into the next presentation by Eric, because there's a lot of decision making when we're setting goals. And I think that what Peter's going to talk about, Eric is going to talk about in a couple of weeks is really going to follow up on this. So I think there's a great step forward to it. So I hope you guys show up in a couple of weeks. I'm going to send out the invite to everybody, and it will be 2 weeks from today on Thursday, again at 1:00. And we're going to have Eric. And then the month after that, Avril is going to talk to us about the 10 areas of life and how do we measure all the different areas. Where do we fit? Where do we need to make things better? Where do we think that we're solid? Or where do we think that we should improve or maybe make some adjustments? So I want to thank everybody for being here today. It was awesome. The conversation was great. And the presentation, Peter, I mean, it was solid. It was just,
Thank you. Yeah.
I've got notes and notes and notes to go through. So I'm going to be doing a lot of learning in the next little while. So thank you, everybody. And I will be sending out a link to the recording afterwards so everybody can go through it. And I will send out the deck as soon as I get it from Peter.
Well, thanks
Thank
again,
you.
Peter, and have a good short trip to Sweden.
Yes.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.